Hello, and welcome to the Intelligent Inbound podcast brought to you by SmartBug Media. I'm your host, Jen Spencer, and today I'm speaking with Mike Tatum, Demand Generation Manager at Momentive, which was formerly known as SurveyMonkey. For all you awesome marketers. Mike is a growth marketing expert who obsesses over the possibilities that automation brings to marketers. I also obsess over these possibilities, so I am super pumped to have him here. Welcome, Mike.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm super excited to be here. So glad I could be a part of this. Big fan of SmartBug, so I'm excited.
Oh, fantastic. Fantastic. Well, before we get into marketing and marketing automation, I want to thank you for your service to our country. You served as an infantryman in the U.S. Army, and I know you were deployed to Iraq back in 2007.
Yeah.
And then after your service, you studied marketing and advertising, and then you began your marketing career from there.
Yeah. It was. It's been an interesting journey. So I obviously I was in the Army. I deployed. I was in Iraq from 2007 to 2009. So a very long tour. And when I got back, I had a little bit of time left on my contract and decided to get out because I really wanted to go to college. I wanted to kind of push myself in a different way. And fun fact about me, I actually didn't start out studying marketing. I actually was originally studying history because I'm a really big history buff too. That's one of my other passions. But I was studying history and I loved it. But then it's also reality sets in. I got to think about what is my career after this? And with history, the obvious thing is teaching. And I tried out teaching, and I have so much respect for teachers, but I hated it. The classroom, I can't do this. So I have the most respect out of anyone for teachers because I know how hard and thankless that job is. I opted out, but I have so much respect for people out there doing it. And that's when I kind of made the shift, found other things I was passionate about, and came into marketing. And it's kind of been a whirlwind from there.
What grade did you teach?
Yeah, they were young kids. They were they third grade? It was young. It was elementary.
Okay.
So it was it was very early. So that's that's the hardest one, I think.
That's tough. I was a teacher. So I started my career as a high school teacher. In college, I student taught as part of my last semester. I student taught 7th grade, which I do believe that if you can teach 7th graders, you can do anything. I think it's amazing. But I was a teacher for 4 years. And actually, I wanted to ask you about that because as a teacher, as a former teacher, I know I carry so much of that experience with me in my role today as a marketing and sales lead, as just a leader, I think, in our organization or any organization I've ever worked with. And I have to imagine, I didn't know you started in teaching, but I have to imagine your time in the Army. I have to imagine you've done a little bit of the same, and I'm curious how your past experience, whether it be from teaching or it's from your service, how it's impacted the way you approach your job as a marketing professional.
Yeah, definitely. I think for me, the biggest parallel, I think, is the emphasis on strategy. Because from the Army, everything comes down to strategy. We have plans on top of plans if plans go wrong. Strategy is everything. So we live and breathe in the Army. And I think one of the things that initially attracted me to marketing was learning how much of it comes from strategy. And I think that's the part that I really connected with because I love planning. I love strategy. I love bringing something from idea to execution. So that's when it got really deep for me. A lot of people, before I knew anything, started studying marketing, I'd see commercials and I'd be like, oh, that's fun and entertaining. But then when I dove in, oh, there's actually strategy to this fun, entertaining Doritos commercial. And they're trying to reach people with this specific type of theme and content. And it's that's what really attracted me.
Yeah. Oh man. I know. I think before I wanted to get into marketing, I was already kind of in marketing, and loved the ideas around branding and, my biggest kind of claim to this was I always wanted to be the person who named the nail polish colors.
Yeah.
Like whoever has that job, right? Of like naming
That's
these
fun.
colors, or I
Yeah.
don't know. So but I didn't like really associate that with marketing, right? Like
Yeah.
it was something different. I didn't really know. But anyway, it's just I just today I see there are so many great marketing programs and people who know they're going to school and they're like, all right, this is what I want to do. And then there's those of us who find it from another avenue. And then I just love how you can carry your past experience, because marketing is really about understanding people and systems and then building that strategy and execution. And so there's so many learnings that you can pull from other experiences in your life. And I think, yours is pretty awesome too.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, I try to bring things from all walks of life. Like I meet all kinds of people, and like random things inspire me. Like I'll be walking or I'll talk to someone in a coffee shop and it'll have this random consumer insight, and I try to bring that into what I do.
Love it. I love it. Well, let's talk a little bit about the work that you're doing now at Momentive. So again, everyone, Momentive, this is going to take, I have to be honest, this is going to take me a while, right? So SurveyMonkey, you relaunched the company just over, I think June of 2021. Yep. As Momentive. So, but what can you tell us? Like, what does the marketing team look like there? I want to understand and help everyone else here understand how the work that you do fits into the greater scheme of marketing there, because we've got a lot of practitioners listening, we've got leaders listening, and I just want to make sure, like, as we continue our conversation, you share some things that you're doing and that are working. I want to make sure everyone understands the context that you're working in.
Yes. Yeah, I'll give you a broad sense. So at a business level, our company has basically 3 business units. So there's the surveys business, which operates under SurveyMonkey, the product, which everyone's very, very familiar with. There's also, we have a business unit of market research solutions that help, like poll the market and survey the market, get data insights you need if you're launching a new product, taking on some new initiative. And then we have the customer experience pillar of the business, which I actually work on, and that's focused on, NPS and CSAT and taking customer feedback and, taking action on it is our big driver there, where we plug right into Salesforce. So if somebody gives you a negative NPS, you get alerted in Salesforce, the customer success manager can get on that quickly, or the AE or whoever it is. So we have that part of the business that I work very closely on, and each of those basically function like their own business. So each pillar of that business has its own marketing team, and they're out there doing the best to grow their product. But we also work together really well, because obviously, like, we cross sell. So, customers who buy market research may also be interested in other products. So it's fun because we kind of have these different products, but we're always working together.
That's great. And you're focused on demand generation for that particular business unit. So, so I'm guessing there's probably also this thinking about the whole brand. You've got like kind of brand and corporate marketing, and then individual demand strategies for those different products.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
All right.
Yeah. So we have, it's always fun. Like with big organizations, like it's always hairy, like how the whole org chart breaks up. But basically we have marketing teams dedicated to each part of the business. And we also have some functions like PR and stuff like that kind of work across the whole enterprise. But yeah, everybody kind of works, teams are kind of structured like that.
Cool. Awesome. Well, I love to kind of dig into some marketing tactics and things that successes you've had. And you can think even like over the course of your career, whether it's a story from Momentive or whether it's a past company where you've been leading marketing or working on campaigns. This is the Intelligent Inbound podcast, so we talk about intelligent inbound marketing. What do you look back on as being your most successful inbound marketing effort?
Yeah, I think for me, the story of my career, like it's always been email marketing. And I think, I've mainly worked in B2B SaaS. So I've always found like that really is always an overlooked part of the business. Like I've worked at startups, I've worked at big companies now at Momentive. And every time like I come in, like email marketing is kind of this overlooked thing where people are like, oh, we'll send out a blast to promote this thing, but there's no real strategy behind it. So I always find like that's always like an easy win, because like I love email marketing. I think it ties really closely into inbound and, digging and making the most out of your CRM. And, I've always found like exponential success there just because nobody's focused on it. So I come in, I build a strategy, I build a system around it. And then like everybody's job becomes more effective. So like paid advertising becomes more effective because there's lead nurturing going on and all these other things efforts that people are putting in.
So you mentioned it's like kind of a quick win, and I do agree, right? Especially if you've got a significant database and maybe it's never really been segmented. And when you say quick win, how quickly is it something that okay, this is a 30-day kind of ramp project. This is 60. This is not like I just help us like kind of quantify what that looks like if someone else is joining an organization. Like how quickly do you think they can be successful?
Yeah, and it really depends on the sales cycle. I think the sales cycle really determines how quickly you kind of see impact from it. So like I've worked in WordPress hosting, kind of the low end. So like, people can get in for $30 a month on web hosting. So results there happen really fast. Like in the matter of like 30, 60 days, you see an immediate impact from a robust email marketing strategy. And then here in Momentive, on the enterprise side, like our solutions are more expensive. So the sales cycle is longer. Like it takes like a good 6 months, maybe even more to really see like the impact of email as kind of, leads and stuff go through a longer sales cycle.
Yeah, for sure. I'm always a little bit jealous of like e-commerce marketers because it's such a like cause effect, right? Like they know they have it down to a science. Like if we send X amount of messages, like this is what will happen. And now there's so much innovation happening like in the SMS space. Have you actually spent any time exploring SMS marketing on the B2B side? I know B2C it's huge, right?
I played around with it a little bit. I never really found like a solid like, SMS is working. I think B2B audience is a little hard. It's like, what's the right context to send SMS? What's not annoying? I think there's probably I think more people need to start doing it so the market gets more comfortable with it. But yeah, I've tried it out myself and it's a little, it's a little tough. Like I do things like, you have like I did an SMS campaign where people would sign up for a free trial and then there would be an option saying, hey, do you want an SDR to text you, set up a meeting? And then we'd send out a text with a calendar link, stuff like that played around with.
Yeah, I've had some experiments like that too. I think the one that worked really well was the last time we had an actual live in-person event, and it was inbound. I'm losing track of which inbound, I guess 2019, and people were booking appointments for some consultations, but here they are roaming around this massive convention center in Boston. They're not in front of their computer. They don't have calendar notifications, right? So we lean into SMS for reminders for those people for those sessions, and that worked, right? But yeah, it's how do you use the opportunity to say, okay, well, what is the context of the particular buyer, customer, client, and how does this help them? Or is it just Is it just like an extra thing? Like, is it annoying?
Exactly. Yeah. It's always interesting. Like when I was digging into it, I always think like, like canned spam around email like is hard, but text message regulations are insane. Like it's a lot, but
as they should be. Well, we're already kind of talking about marketing experiments. That's one of the questions I wanted to ask you about. If there's a marketing experiment, like one of the latest marketing experiments that you've run, and just what were you hoping to accomplish and like how did it go? And we run experiments all the time where sometimes they're successful and sometimes we go, well, that didn't quite do what we thought we was going to do, right? I don't know. Do you have any war stories from a marketing experimentation perspective?
Yeah. I've been experimenting a lot recently around personalization. And I think when you say personalization to people, they automatically think, we'll pull in the contact's first name and we'll pull in their company to the email, and it gets dumbed down to that. So I've run experiments to kind of see like how does that really affect our open rates and our click rates and email, and what really is effective with personalization. And I found that including their name had no impact on the opens or clicks. I think it's one of those things I was already assuming just because so many email marketers are already sending like, hey, such and such, and they users have become kind of numb to that. But what I did find that worked is personalization in terms of how you talk about where they're at in the buyer journey and talk about their specific role, their industry, and specific challenges they're facing. I find that's the more impactful personalization, and that's what really got us over the hump and got us to the next level.
That is really great to hear, and I think so many of us, especially if you're kind of trying to follow some kind of a pre-published, originally published best practice, you think, oh, I need to have some of those personalization tokens. This is like standard operating procedure, but actually, if your CRM is not clean, and you've got kind of some junk in those fields, or you've got, some all caps and some, all the different kinds of, things in there, it actually makes it worse, right? It feels less personal. It does the exact opposite.
For sure.
Or the wrong name, or, there's unfortunately, sometimes our systems are messy, even as much as we try.
Yes. Yeah. The whole, like, people put in like name, it's like fake name. Like, right.
Yeah. Well, let's get into the weeds a little bit on this topic of like buyer journey. And I want to hear from your perspective, the way you feel marketers can and should, or maybe shouldn't be using personalization. Like if you said, all right, we ran this experiment, turns out personalizing by using their name in an email subject doesn't have an impact. Aligning to the buyer journey, and I think lead nurturing is a key part of this. Sure. What are some of your do's, and maybe more importantly, like some of your don'ts? So if someone's like, yeah, okay, I hear what you're saying, Mike. Like, how do I personalize to buyer journey? What does that really mean? How do they do it?
Yeah. I think, you do it in a couple ways. Like one is like the content you're creating. And I look at it from a lead nurturing standpoint, like somebody who, downloads a cheat sheet or an ebook probably isn't ready to talk to sales. And I find that's what a lot of people do. You download an ebook, an SDR is immediately reaching out to you to set up a meeting. It's understanding like if they're downloading an ebook that's maybe introducing what the service that you offer or the software that you offer, understand like there are definitely several steps away from like I'm ready to talk to sales about buying software. Understanding where they're at, making sure they got value out of the guide, and then giving them something that helps kind of bridge that gap. So I may go from an ebook to, we may be having a webinar coming up that gets a little more in depth about the content that was covered in the ebook, and then people who come to the webinar, we may do like more of a tailored product demo that's kind of like a webinar format demo of the product and how it solves some of the things that we were talking about in that webinar. And then from there, we can go on to like, okay, is anybody here ready to talk to sales, have a conversation about how this comes to life at your organization? And I think understanding where people are at in the buyer journey is really important, and making it flexible enough. Because I think you may have people who are like, ready to do this. And like, I'll have subtle, like there'll be a small recovery. Like there's a little like PS kind of section where it's like, if you do want a demo, people can jump the line and go for it, but that's not the focus of the where they're at in the buyer journey. So I think that's what I try to do and try to implement, and it works really well because I think you may have people who probably could get there, but they may be turned off if you're too early with the hard sell. Because I think what happens with the hard sells, people automatically assume there's something wrong with their solution if they have to sell this hard, or they seem really aggressive. I'm turned off by that, so you have to be really careful.
You do. Yeah. And that PS kind of approach, to get people that they want to jump ahead. That's something I know we've used quite a bit. And, it's interesting. Was talking with another podcast guest who was getting these newsletters and really wanted to buy, like really wanted to engage with that brand, but there actually wasn't a mechanism there. And so in some ways, it's like marketers, we've sort of like overcorrected, like, okay, we don't want to come across as too salesy, like value. But then, all right, you do want to make sure you do create that path, that avenue for someone who wants to wave their hand and say, hey, like I do want to talk to somebody.
Yeah.
So it can be a delicate balance.
Yeah, it's tough. It's tough. Yeah, and email marketing is so interesting. I think just from the data that you're able to get, and like unlike a lot of platforms, like you look at SEM, like there isn't like a huge like one-to-one cost to testing things out. So we get to do a lot, and like I'm always surprised. Like I learned like early on in my career, like learning about email marketing, like people actually respond to marketing emails. Like I get dozens of responses a week where people are like, hey, I have more questions about that. And like, it's just great to see like things are resonating. And I look at responses like one of the best compliments you can get is an email marketer, because it's like what you sent was so personal and it felt real to them that they actually responded just as if you had kicked one out from like your personal email.
Yeah. Yep. It is that is great. That is a good sign, right?
Yeah.
That is it's a good, we think about like all these KPIs that we track and those open rates and like all that volume stuff, and the
Exactly.
open rates and click rates are definitely becoming harder and harder to really trust with technology in the way that we're innovating and evolving. But to get those responses, that qualitative feedback,
Yeah.
it does tell you, okay, this is working. People are
Yeah.
responding, right?
For sure. For sure.
Well, I want to, speaking of KPIs, really, inbound marketers are really, and especially, really dialed in marketers who are focused on demand generation. They're data driven. They're looking
Yeah.
at metrics. So if you had just like one dashboard that you could view every morning, that was it. Like, what would you need to have on that dashboard in your role as a demand generation manager to know that you are doing the right thing?
Yeah. If I had one dashboard, I think it really comes down to pipeline. Because I think in demand generation, it's ultimately what you're judged against. Like I ladder up to certain things like trends I see in terms of open rate, click rates, and
Mm-hmm.
all of that. Like that's all well and good. But when people are like evaluating, like, is Mike doing his job? It ultimately comes down to like, what does this pipeline look like? How much of that is sourced to email marketing, and all of that. So that really is like the one thing where it's like, this is what I know the organization is looking for. Like people who don't know anything about marketing, the CFO, like they care about
Mm-hmm.
pipeline. They could care less about my open rate and click rates. Like that's for me to kind of work on in game. But
Yeah.
pipeline is kind of, I think, what the game comes down to.
So if you're saying, okay, pipeline's not quite where it needs to be, then you've got those like secondary or tertiary sort of
Yeah.
reports or dashboards where you're digging in a little bit further. But
Yeah,
that's what you're
exactly.
looking at. Yeah. Well,
Exactly.
that's really great to hear. It should be should come as no surprise. But there are still so many marketing organizations that frankly aren't focused on pipeline.
Yeah.
They're not measured on it. And
Yeah.
so because they're not measured on it, they're not looking at it, right? They're measured on website visit growth, or they're measured on like new lead acquisition.
Yeah.
And so then you become focused on those efforts, and that's where you have situations where marketing can be feeling like they're cheering and feeling really successful, and other parts of the revenue organization are like, I don't know why
Right.
you're so happy, like this isn't working. So,
Exactly. Yeah, it's a delicate balance, and I think
yeah.
pipeline's great because it really does a good job of connecting marketing and sales, because I think
Mm-hmm.
that partnership is so important. I've seen it
Mm-hmm.
be so dysfunctional in a lot of places where they're basically enemies. But
Yeah.
when it comes together, they work together. Like the potential for growth is like incredible. So I think pipeline makes sure that like we're all speaking the same language, and it's something that we hold ourselves accountable to. So
Yeah.
I'm not one of those marketers that's like, okay, we get people to MQLs and like our job is done. Like I want to make sure like this is quality coming through. Like, did they put this op into pipeline? Then it's like, okay, now my job is done. Sales, go out and close them. You said they're qualified. Do your thing. But yeah, I think that's good to kind of bring us closer together.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Um, All right. So before I have one more question for you,
Yeah.
it's I want you to dream a little bit.
Okay.
So and this is like always a challenge, I think, for us. But I want you to pretend time and money are not an issue. That's the challenge. That's the part that's challenging often.
Yeah.
But what's an example? What's a kind of campaign or a strategy that you've just been itching to try? Like you're like, for some point in my career as a marketer, I want to do this thing. Maybe you've just never had the time or money to do it. Anything on your list?
Yeah, on my list, I've been very into product-led growth lately. I think
Mm.
as a strategy, I think there's some incredible examples out there. I haven't really had an opportunity to get in an organization where they're like really big on product-led growth, and that's something that I think is huge. I think it's kind of part of the future of marketing. I think, kind of like that whole piece about pipeline bringing marketing and sales closer
Mm-hmm.
together. Product-led growth, I think, brings like marketing and product a little bit closer together, and I'm really excited about that. Like part of me too, I'm also kind of like a tech nerd as well too. So like I know some basics of coding. Like anyone out there, like I am not a developer, so don't get that impression. But I love code. I love seeing what the engineers are building. I love products. So that's something I'm really interested in too.
Well, that is great, and I mean, we're hearing so much more about product led growth. And is there any just for folks who maybe aren't as
Oh yeah,
familiar, especially because it is something that's definitely newer, or it's definitely very much like tech or SaaS focused
yeah.
specifically. Can you give us a little bit of an example of like, well, what would a
Yeah.
product led growth campaign what might that look like?
Yeah, yeah. I think, product led growth. A great example is actually Calendly. I don't know if you use it, but I use Calendly, and it's
Hmm.
such a great example of product
Yeah.
led growth because the software itself, it's freemium, just like a lot of freemium SaaS companies out there. You come in, you use the product, but what's great is it's kind of growth is actually built into it. So like I came in as a free Calendly user. And it's like I'm setting up appointments, and then it's like, I'm using it. I'm immediately getting value out of it. Like I'm booking
Hmm.
meetings, and then it's like, okay, on the free version, I only get one meeting type. Like, I do have some times where I need to book longer meetings, and then it's like, okay, I want to upgrade. Like the product, like it gave me so much value, it made me want to upgrade. So I don't think anything about, oh, I'm paying, I think it's like $8, $12 a month for this because I've gotten so much value out of it. And it continues on in that vein. So then you get to a point where it's like, okay, I can have as many meeting types as I want. I'm doing it's like, oh, as I'm getting more successful, it's like, oh, maybe I should start charging for my time. They have a
Hmm.
payment integration. So then it's like, oh, you step up to the next tier. And I think that really is what product led growth, I think, comes down to is like looking for what are those cool little triggers that you can build in there when you've given them so much value that them upgrading and giving you money almost becomes like a no brainer. Like I didn't even think twice
Right.
about it. And like for a lot of people out there that don't know me, I am very, very cheap. Like I very, very rarely pay for software like out of my own money. So like for them to get me to pay money, like that's huge. And I think that's what
Yeah.
product-led growth comes down to.
Well, so then there's this, I'm assuming there's also like a marketing layer there too, right?
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
it's not just like
Yeah.
ideally, especially I'm just thinking about the SaaS CEO founders I've known. I mean, they do want to believe that if someone sees their product and uses it, they will just want to
Yeah.
throw money at it, right? Not doesn't always quite happen exactly that way, but I mean, I'm just thinking at it. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I'm
Yeah.
thinking about like the way you layer email
Yeah.
marketing and those lead nurture campaigns with the
Yeah.
product itself is
Exactly.
probably a really important part of that growth engine.
It is. It is. I
Yeah.
think, bringing growth, whether it's called growth marketing or demand generation, I think into the product team, because I think what people automatically assume is like, oh, we have product marketing managers. They take care of that. But that really isn't a product marketing manager role to say
Yeah.
like, oh, this is how the product itself grows. Like you really need people who are growth marketing, demand generation, meaning about product and saying, okay, here's a logical place to be able to make the product encourage people to buy. And I think that partnership is something that I think needs to happen in a lot more organizations. And that's something that like I would be excited to be on the
Yeah.
forefront of that.
Yeah. That sounds great. I mean, I think we're going to see it more and more. We have these like seasons of marketing strategies that we sort of live in, right?
Right.
And I think this is the next season, right? I think that
Yes.
we see coming. So
Exactly.
Awesome. Well, Mike, thank you so much for joining me today. If anyone's listening wants to learn more about you, the work you're doing, where should they go?
Yeah, you can check out my website. It's Mike K Tatum MikeKTatum.com. Check out the site. I have a calendar link on there. Going back to like why I love Calendly. Grab some time on my calendar. Like I'm big about connecting with people, just like we're doing now. Like let's just grab some time. I'm not big about just putting people through random forms. So like let's meet up. Let's talk HubSpot, inbound marketing, whatever you want to do.
Perfect. Oh, I love it so much. Well, thank you all for listening. Please join us next week for another episode of the Intelligent Inbound podcast. You're going to get to meet other industry experts like Mike who are challenging the status quo for inbound marketing. And if you learned something today, please do us a favor, pay it forward by rating and reviewing us on your podcast listening platform of choice. Make it a great day, everyone.